we just decided to have a bit of a stroll around the perimeter. Don't know really what we were thinking. Maybe just killing time. Maybe we had a plan. But we spied an open door. And when you see an open door into a venue where your favourite band is, then you go through that door.
Welcome back to Foo's Files, the podcast for fans of the Foo Fighters. It's Dan here, hope you're all doing well. The band have, of course, wrapped up the Asian tour now with the 3 Japan shows last week. I am intending to cover those off on the podcast. We did have listeners on location in Tokyo and Osaka who are going to come on and talk about it, but logistically, it's just been a case of finding a convenient time to catch up with them on their travels, so we'll probably look to do that next week. So in the meantime, we've got another storyteller. His name is Dave Hardwick, a long-time fan who has been to 40 Foo Fighters shows, which is pretty impressive. And he's actually in possession of a small piece of Foo Fighters history too, which he's going to tell us all about. I know we've got a few listeners who were on the old Foo Fighters post board. Remember the good old online message boards? Well, he was a keen contributor to that back in the day too, which he does reference. And Dave also hosts his own radio show, which comes across quite evidently. He's got one of those really good voices for the airwaves, much more professional than I sound anyway. So welcome to the Foo's Files podcast, UK-based fan Dave Hardwick.
Hi Dan, thanks very much for having me on Foo Files. Absolutely love the podcast, particularly enjoyed your Barrett Jones interview. So I feel quite privileged to have the chance to be a guest on the show as well. My name's Dave Hardwick. I'm a 42-year-old massive Foo Fighters fan. If I could be a fan as my job, I would. Sadly, I can't, so I'm a teacher. But I've been a massive Foo Fighters fan since 1997. But needless to say, I've been through phases of obsession, of travelling around the UK, seeing them as many times as I can. I'm currently at 40 times. No intention to retire anytime soon. And I am privileged to have quite a Foo Fighters collection, and one item in particular, which I'm really looking forward to talking to you about a little bit later on. Obviously, having seen the band 40 times, I've had my fair share of interesting experiences out on the road with them. Back in 2002, I think, is the one that kind of stands out to me as perhaps being the most outlandish. I'd seen them, well, I ended up seeing them 12 times that year, and I essentially did all the English dates of the UK tour that winter, which was Manchester, Newcastle, Birmingham, Cardiff, and then 2 nights at Wembley Arena. It was at the Birmingham NEC, having slept at Manchester Piccadilly Station overnight, and I do use the word slept incredibly loosely. It was cold, the benches were metal and incredibly hard. I whiled away a fair amount of time on one of the old BT internet phones, trying to post on the old Foo Fighters postboard from what was essentially a public phone. Didn't go well. I think I may have just about managed it. But having had pretty much no sleep after the Manchester show, which was a great show in itself, it was like one of the only times that Lonely As You has ever been played, and it was incredible. And someone even kind of invaded the stage from under the drum riser. Very bizarre show, but very brilliant. But yeah, the next night at Birmingham, because I hadn't slept, and I'd been at the station, I left for the gig very early, and so I arrived pretty early. got there, and I'm not the most social of people, but started chatting to people in the queue. Got friendly with a chap called Ash, and he went by the handle My Hero on the Foo Fighters postboard. So Ash, if you're listening, telling the story. And he didn't want to just wait around, and we spoke to somebody in the queue and asked them if they could just keep our place, and we just decided to go for a bit of a stroll. There was another guy with us who Ash knew. I think his name was Mark, if I remember correctly. And we just decided to have a bit of a stroll around the perimeter. Don't know really what we were thinking. Maybe just killing time. Maybe we had a plan. But we spied an open door. And when you see an open door into a venue where your favourite band is, then you go through that door. So we went through, avoiding all security at all costs. And I don't know how we came up with the idea. Maybe it literally just presented itself to us. But we ended up sneaking into a disabled toilet cubicle. And this is 3 teenage guys stuck in there, essentially, because we couldn't come out without getting rumbled. We stayed in there for, I think, 4 hours. Thankfully, my bladder held. I can't say the same for at least one of the other guys with me. Apologies if I'm dropping you in it there, Ash or Mark, if you're listening. But do you know what? It was absolutely worth the 4 hours of discomfort in that disabled toilet cubicle, because we fully intended to come out when we heard them sound checking. Because at that point, we had nothing to lose. We could either come out, see a bit of a sound check and get kicked out, or we could come out, see the whole sound check and then get kicked out, or we could come out, see some sound check and somehow magically find our way backstage. It wasn't to be that one, unfortunately. We did sneak out though, and we kind of loitered at the back and then edged our way forward. Could kind of feel Gus's eyes on us. He was the tour manager. But you know what? I think he must have been feeling kind, because the band were playing Comeback. And anybody who's listening to this podcast knows how rare it is to hear that played live. And he let us, I like to think, hear the whole song, and then he approached us and asked us what on earth we were doing. Ash and I both were students at university at the time, both involved in student media. We tried a little bit of a blag. It didn't work. Out we went. Very nicely, very calmly and very kindly. Gus was such a gentleman. Maybe perhaps he kind of appreciated our endeavour, but off we trotted back to the queue, and bless those people in the queue. They had saved our space and absolutely didn't mind us slotting back in. There is a mild little sidebar to that one, which made it a bit awkward. In further conversations, I realised that the person who I had asked to keep my place with quite a lot of bravado and, we've just been in the sound check, I was probably a bit of a douche back in those days. The person that we had asked and who had very kindly done it was actually the person that I had beaten on the Steve Lamacq evening session competition to win the 1 7-inch vinyl, which I'll tell you all about in just a minute. But needless to say, my God, that was awkward.
Today I will be performing a scene from the movie Orange County, in which my character, Jack Black, is asleep on the couch when he receives an important phone call from his brother, Sean.
So I am the very proud owner of a piece of Foo Fighters history, in that I own what is considered to be one of the rarest pieces of Foo Fighters merchandise there is. I am very privileged to own the only officially released, as I'm aware that there are some test pressings out there, but I own the only officially released 7-inch vinyl edition of The One on single. It's literally the only one in the world. I was very lucky as part of the prize not only to get The One vinyl and a certificate of authenticity stating that it is the only one, but I got to go backstage at one of the shows on the UK tour, which I talked about earlier. I went backstage the first night at Wembley Arena. Luckily, It didn't feel lucky at the time, but luckily I had a seated ticket for that evening, and so I took the vinyl along and then met Gus at the front of the stage after the show, and he took me backstage where I got to just go and hang out with the band, essentially. I walked into the backstage area, and there was Chris, there was Taylor, and there, just off talking to someone, was Dave. So I said hello to Chris. I'd met him a couple of times before, made sure that I had a quick chat with Taylor, but then I noticed that Dave had clocked what it was that I had in my hand, and he kind of came bounding over and was like, "Oh my God, you're the kid that won the vinyl." And he was genuinely so excited to see this 7-inch vinyl of the one, because, as he said, not even they have a copy. It's literally the only one officially released in existence. And so he kind of took it off me, paraded it around the room a little bit, was telling people about it. During this, he kind of sat me down in the seating area, introduced me to Jordan, who he was dating at the time, who obviously we now know as his wife. And, I mean, it was a slightly awkward conversation because I didn't really know what to say. But he came and sat down. We had a quick chat about the vinyl with him and Taylor. Apparently, the photo on the back was taken in Taylor's backyard, which I didn't know at the time until he told me. And he was just so excited and so graceful about it. The whole band were just wonderful. Obviously, they were a 4-piece at the time. I only got it signed by Dave. I think that was probably a conscious decision because obviously Foo Fighters is his band. But also, I didn't want to get it signed by only 3 of them, and Nate wasn't in the room at the time. I'd passed Nate. He was in a side room just having a chat with a friend, and I didn't want to disturb him. So I've gone off on a massive tangent there, kind of about what the vinyl is and what part of the prize and the experience was. But let me tell you about how I won it. So back in 2002, they were advertising the One UK single. It was on heavy rotation on MTV and, you know, other equivalent channels, that sort of thing. It was released as a single in Australia, and it seemed like the plan was obviously going to be that it was going to be released in this country too. But for whatever reason, the record company, band, whoever, they made the decision that in the UK, it wouldn't be released as a proper single. There would be 1 copy released on 6 different formats. Now, those formats were 7-inch vinyl, 12-inch vinyl, CD, 3-inch CD, cassette, and mini disc. I don't know, sadly, what happened to any of the other formats. I know one of them, very sadly, went missing, as I once received a message on the Foo Fighters postboard from someone politely inquiring whether the picture I had posted was their copy of the One single, whatever their format was. So I don't know what happened to any of the others. I know that I have the 7-inch vinyl. It's locked away very safely. And I know that one sadly did go missing. Personally, I'd love to know what happened to the others. But back to the 1 7-inch vinyl. So they were to be given away on various different media outlets. My one came from Radio 1, and I won it on the Radio 1 evening session with Steve Lamacq. I distinctly remember I was out with some friends playing table tennis and badminton because I was really cool, and I knew that the competition was taking place. For some reason, though, either my phone was playing up or I didn't have enough battery. I ended up taking one of my friend's phones. Now, you know, this was 2002, so the phones were a bit ropey, and using his phone, which probably wasn't the best idea in terms of, you know, making sure that I could keep in touch. But the way the competition was run was that you had to give a 1-word review of the song. I agonised over it, and looking back, I find it a bit cringeworthy what I went for. But I chose intoxicating. Make of that what you will. But I really did agonise over it at the time. And for whatever reason, I was chosen. So 2 people were chosen, myself and somebody else whose name, I never got her name, but like I say, I ran into her in the queue at the NEC in Birmingham later in the year, which was awkward. And we then had to do a head-to-head of Foo Fighters questions. That included lyrics, it included dates, and by the end of it, we were neck and neck. We both got one question wrong. I can't remember the question that she got wrong, but I completely froze on the lyrics to Exhausted. She got lyrics from Everlong, which was her favourite song. I got lyrics from Exhausted. Just bad luck, I guess. So it went to a tiebreaker, and I will never forget the tiebreaker. The tiebreaker was how many copies of The Colour and the Shape have been sold in the UK up to 2002. And weirdly, I had read that recently. Like I say, I was an obsessed Foo Fighters fan, and I had read the answer recently. She was allowed to answer first. She gave the answer 50,000. And I don't want to sound like a douche. I don't want to sound arrogant. But at that point, I kind of knew that I was going to win. However, even though I sort of knew the answer, having read it recently, I still panicked ever so slightly. She said 50,000. I honestly, if I was being horrible about it, I could have just said 50,001 and I would have won. But I went, 500,000, which was closer. The answer, I think, was about 325 to 350,000. So I was closer, but I really felt like I very nearly completely mucked it up just by panicking. However, when Steve Lamacq told me that I had won, I just yelled, come on. At this point, I was just kind of encased away in a corner of a sports hall with everyone just leaving me alone because they knew that something important was happening, and I just absolutely yelled. My friends who I was with, they couldn't believe it. It was meant to be. I was the biggest Foo Fighters fan that they'd ever met at that point. I still have the vinyl. I get asked a lot, oh, how much is that worth? And I've been told it's worth however much someone would pay for it. But do you know what? That doesn't matter to me. It's a piece of Foo Fighters history, and I am so glad and proud to kind of be the guardian of that. I'd love to know what happened to the other formats, the other editions. Maybe one day I will find out. And do you know what? I hope that the person who had theirs liberated from them, I hope that they get it back one day. I know that they were compensated with a copy of All My Life on vinyl. That was the numbered one. They got number 1 of that, but it doesn't really make up for it, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion.
This is our new single. It's called Generator, everybody.
Like I said, having seen the band 40 times, I do have a fair few stories from the road. But I'll just tell you the story of the very first time that I met the band. And I'm very lucky to have met them probably in excess of 8 times now. The very first time was early 2000. I forget the exact date. I want to say it was April 2000. But it was when they played a secret show at the Scala Club in London. Now, I can't remember how. I think it was probably through Kerrang! That I started to get wind that there was going to be a secret Foo Fighters show. The original rumour was that it was going to be at the garage. And so I, and no doubt many other people, started bombarding the garage with phone calls, because it really wasn't au fait with email in those days, asking, are Foo Fighters going to play? Oh, what's happening? Like, I was very desperate to know what was going to be going on. They completely denied it, as it was. They weren't hosting the band anyway. Maybe they were meant to be and it changed. I couldn't say. But irrespective of not knowing where the secret show was, it was announced that there would be a secret show and that the home for that show would be announced on the day. Probably in complete idiocy and just blind naivety, I decided, along with a couple of friends of mine, that we'd head up to London. You know, we'd head up to London and we'd make it to the show, wherever it ended up being. So, having spent the morning watching There's Something About Mary at my friend Chris's house, we then got on the train, headed to London, and proceeded to an internet cafe where we sat on the Foo Fighters postboard, assuming that's where the announcement would be made. Don't know why we thought that. Waiting to find out what would happen. Now, eventually, there was a post about the show at the Scala, but it was essentially saying tickets have been getting given away all day. It's been on the radio. You're going to have to be incredibly lucky to get into this show. Now, we took that as a challenge, and we hopped in a taxi from wherever we were, probably around Charing Cross, and we hopped in a taxi to the Scala, which is in King's Cross. We didn't get there especially late, but it was an early start show. And we got there and walked up to the door and like, oh, are Foo Fighters playing? Yes, mate. Can we go in? No, mate, they're just finishing. And my God, we were devastated. There was no way that they wouldn't let us in even for the last couple of tracks. We had no clue that they'd started so early. We really were in the dark and completely oblivious, and yet we just went on blind faith that we would get in. But sadly, it wasn't to be. However, we were incredibly lucky as we just kind of started milling around outside, not really sure what to do, feeling a bit down in the dumps. And we spotted their cars and thinking, well, why the hell not? We just ended up having a quick chat with their drivers, said how far we'd come, and that we'd travelled, about 100 miles, but not got in. And bless them, these drivers took pity on us, kind of brought us to the other side of the barrier, and when the band came out, made a point of saying to Dave, these guys travelled over 100 miles to see you and didn't get in. Would you mind signing something for them? And he did. So I did embarrass myself very slightly as they kind of walked past us. It was almost like one of those procession lines where, you go and walk along and shake people's hands. And the band kind of filed past us, and Chris was relatively new to the band at that point. For some reason I panicked and just went, all right, mate! My God, still mortifies me to this day, just as much as my first verbal interaction with Dave Grohl, which was literally, hello, Dave, I'm Dave too. I'm a big fan. My God, does it get worse than that? I really don't think it does. But he was so lovely, signed my copy of The Colour and the Shape, signed There's Nothing Left to Lose from my friend Chris, and we were just absolutely giddy. First experience of meeting the band in any way, shape or form, and they set the bar high with their kindness and just how brilliant and open they were. And every time I've met them, and there's been a fair few times, they've always been absolutely wonderful.
Thanks, Dave, for sharing some of his tales of Foo fandom. And if you do know where those other copies of the one ended up, or who with for that matter, please do get in touch, because it'd be really nice to help join up some of the dots. Also, if you want to be our next storyteller, contact us with your story at foosfilespod@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening to Foos Files. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.